Are you still working the old way, working 9 to 5, chained to a cubicle or office, and doing work you don't really enjoy? The Procter & Gallagher Institute is helping thousands just like you break away from traditional ways of working while stepping into the vision of their dream. If you're ready to leave behind monotony and frustration, click to learn more about how we can set you up for instant and lasting success. I'm Bob Proctor. Come and visit us at thinkingintoresults.com.
Faithful. It is I, your mandated reporter, and frankly I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich. And this is the Metal Hammer of Doom. Tonight we are reviewing The Great War by Sabaton. The Great War is the 9th studio album by Swedish, IKEA from Sweden, I like meatballs, power metal band Sabaton.
Speaking of immortality, let's talk about jokes that don't die.
Fuck you. Fuck you never dies. It was released on July 19th, 2019. It's the first studio album to feature guitarist Tommy Johansson. The first single was Fields of Verdun. First listen, okay. Second listen, wow, this is pretty good. Third listen, 19th listen, Fields of Verdun, which was released on May 3rd, 2019. The next single, The Red Baron, which is also amazing, was released on June 13th. And the title song, Great War, was released on June 27th. The fourth single, 82nd All the Way, was released on July 20th. They've released a few different iterations of this album. We're just going to do the regular one. All regular, all the time. Speaking of regular, ladies and gentlemen, the disapproving dad, Jesse Starcher. How do you do, sir?
Oh, Mark Radulich, don't you love it when people interrupt your intros?
Yes, it's fucking-tastic.
He just loves it. He loves it.
He loves it.
I can't. I'm glad to be back here and talking Sabaton tonight. You know, I was really looking forward to this album, so it's going to be a fun discussion.
Well, anything's got to be better than the Texas Bullshit Coalition that we listened to last week.
Oh, you're racist against Mogwais.
You're not the first person to accuse me of that. Speaking of racist Mogwais, ladies and gentlemen, joining us on the podcast, the great historian, Mr. Know-It-All. He will not compromise. He will not be told what to do. He will not step aside. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Robert Winfree. How do you do, sir?
I feel like that little stupid rhyme sort of doohickey you did there was in reference to something that I don't understand.
It's a Primus song called Mr. Know-It-All, and I feel like I've told you that before.
I don't think that's ever come up.
No,
I
know I've introduced you as Mr. Know-It-All.
Yeah, but I don't think you've ever done it that way before. That's led me to actually ask what that's in reference to.
They call me Mr. Know-It-All.
I knew
will
he
not
was going to start
compromise. I will not be told what to do. I shall not step aside.
Bass hits.
Yeah. You're Mr. Know-It-All.
Fair enough.
Thanks for coming on the show, Winfree.
So
that's what he meant to say.
So we brought Robert Winfree on. No, I didn't. So we brought Robert Winfree on the show because he is a fan of Sabaton and all things referencing war and death. So remind the good people, because I think we've done this before with you. We brought you on, I think, for The Last Stand in 2016. When you start listening to Sabaton, how much do you like them, and are you wearing any pants?
Look, I'm wearing pants because there's other people in the house.
Okay.
Otherwise, I would not, because pants are evil. They
Yep.
are the spawn of the devil and should not be allowed, but I accept that we live in a heretical society where they are mandated by laws in various places and good taste in others.
So about Sabaton.
I stumbled across them years ago. I think my Pandora station kicked them on when I was, after I'd expressed some interest in a few other, symphonic or power metal bands, and like, hey, here, you might like this. And it turns out that the algorithm was correct. I did, in fact, like that. So it's been several years at this point, and as for how much, I don't think I've ever really turned off one of their things, so for whatever value you want to ascribe that.
All right. Jesse, I know you've been looking forward to this for a while. I think were you a part of the show when we did The Last Stand?
Yeah, I believe I was. And I found out about Sabaton from this here show, ladies and gentlemen. The Metal Hammer of Doom introduced me to Sabaton. Coop and Mark were, I think, reviewing, maybe, is this the third album you guys have reviewed on here? You guys didn't review one before, have you?
Let's see here. The Last Stand was 2016. Before that was Heroes in 2014. We probably skipped Heroes.
Okay, well, either way, it was either you guys talking them up or me having the opportunity to hop on the show and talk about it, because I was really excited about Last Stand. I mean, that was an album that I shared with my daughter. I was like, you got to check this out. You wouldn't believe. It's a metal band, and it tells you about history. So
what you learning, Dad?
like, please turn back on the K-pop. I said, no, not happening.
Good decision.
So anyway, yeah, and here we've been waiting for a new Sabaton album to drop, and we get 38 glorious minutes of Sabaton here. Let's see. Yeah, let's talk about it.
All right. Well, let's not waste any more time, because we spent the first 45 minutes doing other stuff, not having a podcast. So
it was Mark pouting. All right, let's be real about what that was.
Okay, I still think we should be doing Flash Gordon, but I'm not going to waste time on the podcast.
No one agrees with that.
Everybody
Literally
agrees
I
with that.
lived a whole lifetime in that 45 minutes. I swear.
By the way, I'm now
You are
thinking
not wrong.
I'm going to check the plot synopsis for Beastmaster and see if that one works. In the meantime,
Trying to fit it in, just trying.
In the meantime, let's go overhead to our first track of the evening. This is The Future of Warfare. Alright, so that jam, The Future of Warfare, was actually about tanks in the battles of Flers-Courcelette and Villers-Bretonneux. What do you got for me?
I don't know how your French is somehow worse than every other language you have butchered, but boy, is that bad.
Oh,
It's not Fleur Curselet. I tried. I tried very hard there, okay? I tried.
You get no credit for trying.
How do you pronounce it?
Look, my French is pretty bad, so I'm not going to try
No,
because
you're-
it's even more amusing.
you put
No,
me
I'm going to
on-
let yours is going to stand, Mark. That's it. That's what everyone's going to hear.
that's the bar.
Look, everyone that listens to this podcast knows I can't pronounce shit from Europe, but still,
Oh, boy.
I gave it a shot here. If you're gonna sit there and put me on blast, you have to give it a try.
I most certainly do not.
All right, so tell me about Fleur's Corselet and Viller's Bretonneux.
Oh, okay. Just for the record, that's not Villers.
How do you pronounce it?
I believe that would be Villet.
Villet. Okay, tell me about Flanders and Villa's Vanilla Britain.
Oh God, you hurt my soul. All right, you
Talk.
mentioned these.
Talk, monkey.
Every Wednesday, Robert Winfree. Every Wednesday.
Dude, you have nothing to complain about. You do not know my pain. All right.
You know what?
As you mentioned,
quit your bitching. You've now bitched so much about the kitchen. Quit your bitching about the kitchen.
hey, I got it off the schedule. I win.
No, it's still on. I'm just doing it with Jesse on a different day, and you guys can go jerk each other off to scary stories in the closet.
As opposed to you attempting to derive some form of pleasure on any sort of level from the existence of Melissa McCarthy.
Correct. No, what are you doing?
I'll take-
What are you doing?
I'll take
ick
mine.
For? Whoa, what are you doing ick for? You're the one doing it with me.
Yeah, I know. But I'm probably going to.
Now
Shut up,
you
Winfree.
will know my pain.
I'm taking my wife to that one. She has a thing for Melissa McCarthy, and she appreciates her comedy. Don't ask. Just tell us the history about this
Look,
song.
comedy is in pretty heavy air quotes there. And speaking of air quotes and tanks, this is the primary history of these two battles. The first one in particular. It is the first instance in human history of tanks being used in some form of warfare capacity. There had been elements of armored, various armored weaponry beforehand, but certainly nothing to the extent of the tank. Nothing as, the supreme irony of this is the tanks that the British used, because it was the British that unveiled them here, and used them to score significant victories within the context of the battle that they were deployed. They'd never been seen by the German troops saw them, and a significant number of them panicked. They just didn't know what they were. And there were two different types of tanks. They had the same basic construction, but one of them was more what we would recognize as a tank contemporarily, and another one that was designed expressly to deal with anti-personnel. So it did not have the heavy like the artillery style cannon, the heavy cannon, the heavy gunfire, and instead had a bunch of different machine guns that was designed to serve as a partial protection from the other ones in case people were able to close distance on them and assault them from close proximity where they were somewhat vulnerable. Now again, a lot of the Germans who saw them when they got close just freaked out because rifle fire against a tank is useless.
Yeah,
it is
you could do
utterly
nothing.
useless. Even most machine gun fire
The
from,
bullets, they do nothing. Sorry, go ahead.
Even most like Vickers machine gun fire was useless unless it had very specific armor-piercing rounds attached to it. They're almost impenetrable. Now there had been experimentation with this type of war machine before, and I think, by this point in the history of warfare, fully armored and armor-plated ships were a thing. They had almost completely, in fact, by the 1900s, they had completely made obsolete the old wooden style of naval vessels in favor of fully armor-plated ones, or full armor ones, not just armor-plated. There were a lot of wooden ones, especially depending on in the mid 1800s, that would use metal plating along with the basic wooden construction, but it wasn't much of a thing. And the crazy thing about this is the tanks, while they were effective in many ways, were also in many ways not. They weren't really designed. They had not yet really found a design that would let them go over multiple trenches that were close together. A lot of the machinery was a bit suspect. A lot of them stalled. In fact, just the initial use of them, at least one of the tanks didn't actually start.
Jeez.
What was these like? Chevy, what was these like? Like Gremlins and Chevy Novas and shit.
I don't know. Again, a lot there. I mean, you can remember that a lot of just automated automobile technology was still a little bit iffy at this point in time. But they were, again, profoundly effective, even initially from just a psychological perspective. Just, we got nothing, run.
Mm-hmm. You'd have nothing left. There's nothing to do.
You were much better off instead of actually trying to...
World War I, for I think most of the foot soldiers on the ground were using bayonets at this point, right?
They still had... They all had them... They were issued to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, they still are. Like bayonets were still issued into the Vietnam conflict. The bayonets were standard issue.
I was going to say bayonets. At least the bayonet rifles that I'm thinking of are like single, maybe 2 shots at best.
No. We weren't dealing with like muskets here.
Tomahawks.
No, there was most of them were again. There was, if you want to get into the actual weaponry, most of them were at a minimum semi-automatic rifles.
Okay.
Well, that or bolt action. There were a lot of bolt action.
I was thinking more of the bolt action type. I again, and to the degree that you could fire multiple shots, I'm a little sketchy on, but I knew that they were bolt action.
Yeah, there was a lot of that.
Yeah. So Jesse, you've got a rifle with a knife on the end of it and a bolt action shot. And down comes this death machine with a turret on it.
Dude, seriously, you're running for your life because as soon as you
throw it down the bayonet and making a run for it.
Yeah, you're not. I understand, like being on the battlefield. Imagine what came before this and what you were expecting. Then all of a sudden you see that. And first off, you got barbed wire lining trenches. That was your defense. I mean, a human body was going to have a hard time getting through that. It'd at least slow them down.
Right. The only person that kept getting wrapped up in the barbed wire was Sabu.
He kept pointing to the sky. I don't understand, sir.
Weirdly enough, though, every time one of those tanks shot, Joey Janela would land on his head.
So yeah, these things were made to obviously just bypass any mode of defense.
Well, again, they did in some respects, but in others they struggled. They struggled with elements of the terrain.
Yep.
If things were really muddy and really slick, they struggled with traction. If you had a lot of trenches relatively close together, they would struggle to get over them. A bunch of them capsized. Seriously, a bunch of them just wound up flipping over. It was
the image I have in my head cracks me up. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's a bizarre thing to think about because we're so used to. I mean, by World War II, they had really figured those things out, and nowadays they are essentially perfected.
Yeah.
You know what the prototype of the Mark I tank was called, Mark?
What?
The Little Willie.
Ooh. Speaking of Little Willie, what do we actually think of the song?
Oh, we got to talk about music now?
Yes.
Well, first off, Sabaton comes crashing in with this epic sounding, just like they always do, epic sounding. And they're telling a story here. I think this whole, correct me if I'm wrong here, Winfree. This whole album is about the First World War, correct? That is
correct.
Okay, so it's the first song on the album. It's the very first song that they decide to mention tanks. So surprise. Sabaton's mentioning tanks here. But I like the song. It's a great way to bring us in.
Winfree, you were going to jump in with something?
Well, I was just going to say that, it's a much longer part of the discussion, but World War I was... you know what? Actually, what I'm going to talk about there fits better with a few other songs later on, so I'll put a pin in it for now. But, yeah, they do a really good job in this song of kind of because it kind of mimics I don't know how much it mimics this battle in particular, but it mimics a lot of the kind of lull and then explosion that accompanies warfare generally. There's a lot of nothing followed by intense periods of activity and terror, and then a lot of nothing again.
All right.
And there's segments of this song that kind of replicate that.
This next song is about Lawrence of Arabia, believe it or not. At least that's what the wiki tells me. It is called...
That's what the lyrics tell you, too.
7 Pillars of Wisdom.
From home, a man with a mission, in the heat of the glistening sun, in the heart of ancient tradition, this man's journey has only begun. Lead the charge, a raider has entered the battlefield. Sabotage, the game is about to unfold. As the darkness falls and Arabia calls, one must press his wings as the battle begins. May the land lay claim unto Lawrence name. 7 pillars of wisdom lights the flame. Our goals to gain independence. Hide and seek hunters hot to the trail. Join the ranks, obtain their acceptance. Side by side, raid the Ottoman rail. Lead the charge, Medina, Medina, Damascus calls. Sabotage, demolish the bridges to dust. As the darkness falls and Arabia calls, one must press his wings as the battle begins. May the land lay claim unto Lawrence name. 7 pillars of wisdom lights the flame.
That song is bad fucking ass, man. I mean, I know we're gonna hear a lot of history, a lot of education going on, but if you're just out for rocking with your cock out, this song's a good song to do it to. That's pretty amazing, don't you think, Jesse?
I agree. I do like this one. I don't know shit about Lawrence of Arabia, though.
I hate both of you. You are culture. You joked about me being culturally anachronistic.
You are.
The fact that neither of you have seen Lawrence of Arabia.
No, we're not culturally anachronistic. We're both pretty culturally hip for middle-aged men. What we are dumb. You're the smart one. Take it or leave it.
This was only a giant blockbuster of a movie.
Yeah, but it was more than 5 years ago. Fuck it.
From what I understand, wasn't this the one that was like extremely boring?
Everybody else.
I'm just December 16th, 1962. I'm looking at it right now. I have no idea. So again,
yeah, Jesse, it was the Ishtar of its time.
Maybe that's what I'm getting it confused with, is Ishtar. My bad. Winfree, you got to educate me here, sir. That's
Jesse,
what I'm
you're the type of person who doesn't like The Godfather, aren't you?
You're making an assumption that I've seen that one as well.
No. At this point, I assume you. No, I'm not giving you that much credence.
Lawrence of Arabia, damn it, tell me.
Well, I don't even know where to start if you guys don't actually have the fundamental basics of this down, so I'll try to be very brief. First of all, go see this freaking movie.
Okay, well, it's about a guy named Larry who goes to Saudi Arabia, right?
Yes. Well, that's actually his last name. It's about a British military, I forget what his rank was, my apologies. A British military person, he had some actual ranking, was an officer, by the name of T.E. Lawrence, who was embedded with the locals in Arabia, it would become Saudi Arabia, other parts of the Middle East, to try to sabotage elements of the Ottoman Empire's supply lines that were feeding them, again, troops and material through the, either up through the peninsula itself or down into the Mediterranean, so on and so forth. And he was there for a while. Was very successful at what he was sent there to do. Again, I really do have to encourage everyone to see the movie starring, I believe it was Laurence Olivier.
It said Peter O'Toole. And...
Peter O'Toole. That's it. My mistake. Yeah, Peter O'Toole's in it.
What if we just did a watch along to Ishtar?
Here's a reference that Mark will understand. Alec Guinness is in it.
Yeah. Alec Guinness. Is this the one where he plays an Indian, or is that a different movie?
No, that's a different movie. He's one of the Bedouin chieftains in this movie.
Okay, what am I thinking of where he plays the Indian?
I don't know.
Because I might have actually seen Lawrence of Arabia when I was in college, if that's the case.
You probably did, and just are so racially insensitive. You're confusing the cultures.
Well, considering everybody in the class thought it was racist that he was playing anything but an old white guy or a Jedi.
Again, further proof that the American institutions of higher learning have been dog shit for decades now.
I'm looking this up.
A Passage to India is a 1984 British-American epic historical drama film written, directed by blah, 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 brings into their acquaintance the eccentric elderly Hindu Brahmin scholar, Professor Narayan Godbole, Alec Guinness.
Yeah, which is a different movie entirely.
Okay, that might have been it then.
Whatever. Anyway, yeah, he destroyed a lot of supply lines. He took a couple of... There was at least one major fortification.
It was definitely a passage to India.
Yeah, there's at least one major fortification that he was responsible for destroying and the changing of hands on that was considered nigh impossible in many respects. A lot of the... Again, some of the the title of the song, actually, 7 Pillars of Wisdom, comes from it's the title of one of his books that he authored. He's largely responsible for the capture, the liberation of the entire Arabian Peninsula from the Turkish influence. Well, the Ottoman Empire, which nowadays would become Turkey. The Ottoman Empire encompassed several different individual countries, Turkey being one of them. Turkey was just the...
I was under the impression the Ottoman Empire became IKEA.
Oh boy. Jeez. It's a stark contrast from Winfree actually dropping serious knowledge and then Mark Radulich chiming in with a fucking IKEA joke. Again.
I always like to see if I can make Winfree's ears bleed. That's my goal.
Sorry, Winfree.
Don't apologize. I knew what I was in for.
What'd you think of the song? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize class was still in session.
No, go ahead. We can move. Again, I just watched the movie. It's not a 100% faithful retelling, but it is largely accurate.
We'll get to it right after Tron Legacy, I promise, and Flash Gordon.
No, you
won't. What did you think of the actual song?
I mean, I struggle to disagree with your assessment of the song itself, in all honesty. What's there to complain about?
Yep, exactly. All right. This is one of the aforementioned singles. This is 82nd All the Way. Here we go.
In the draft of 1917, a man from Tennessee. Overseas to the trenches he went, from the land of the free. Into war he brought trooping so long, a rifle and his faith. Joined the ranks as a private assigned to 338. There, on that day, held in York, entered the fray, saving the day, 82nd all the way. Into the
Yeah, buddy. The 82nd all the way. Which is, the theme, it says here on the Wikipedia page, is Alvin and the Chipmunks. Go.
At what point do we apologize to our listeners?
They know the buy-in at this point.
All right. Hit it.
I really don't know why I should have to even begin recounting the story of Alvin York, but because
nobody knows who the fuck he is. Go.
Because Mark is ignorant of history and therefore doomed to repeat it. Again, Alvin York was an American serviceman. He was promoted throughout the course of the war to the rank of sergeant. He is, hence the colloquialism of Sergeant York. I mean, there was a movie made about him in 1941. That was and here, so that Mark will actually pay attention to that statistic, it was the highest grossing film of the year.
Yeah, it hasn't beaten Gone with the Wind. Who gives a shit?
Starred Gary Cooper. He won the Oscar for Best Actor that year for that role. Anyway, he was he was an American serviceman. He was drafted, and initially, there's some kind of conflicting reports about this. He initially just was not all that interested in fighting because he grew up within a Protestant faith that, while it wasn't actively pacifistic in terms of its preaching, that was kind of the mindset he adopted. Throughout the course of boot camp, he struggled with that. He counseled with a few people in his life, both in the service and out, and decided that God wanted him to fight and would protect him if he did so, as he was supposed to do. And he, again, started to serve with no reservations beyond that, to the best of my knowledge. Okay. He was the big thing. Let's start with the big thing here. The instance that earned him the Medal of Honor took place on October 8th of 1918 during a specific offensive where York's battalion was supposed to capture Hill, and you hear this in the song, Hill 223.
Wasn't that the show with the all-black cast where they lived in a part of, I think it was Harlem?
It's 227, sir.
I got him confused.
I'm sure you did. He was, while not solely responsible, there were other men in his unit. He was principally responsible for the capture of 132 enemy combatants, the destruction of at least one major German machine gun nest that allowed the battalion and the subsequent army to actually take the hill in question, which was a strategic, pretty significant strategic value.
Did he get the machine gun eggs?
What?
I don't understand your reference.
You said that he captured a machine gun nest. I was wondering if he also got the eggs.
Oh, jeez. Oh.
No, it was out of season.
Gosh.
Perfect. Jesse, why are you embarrassed of me?
Oh.
You really shouldn't have to ask. He was this was very famous. This was at the time he enjoyed a lot of notoriety during his lifetime for the heroics he put forth on that, and this song again details elements of that. And frankly, if I ever do something worthy of having a song written after me, I hope it's half this badass.
Yeah, this guy, the Medal of Honor is no joke. I mean, that is something that's bestowed upon some of the most prestigious. It's the most prestigious honor bestowed upon people who have done some crazy heroic actions. I'm reading just a little bit through the wiki on what happened on October 8th, and there's this one sentence here, or a couple sentences. During the assault, 6 German soldiers in a trench near York charged him with fixed bayonets. York had fired all the rounds in his M1917 Enfield rifle, but drew his M1911 semi-automatic.
For the love of all that's holy, he drew the Browning model 1911 semi-automatic pistol that was pretty standard issue, and he killed all of them before they got to him.
Gunned them down. I mean, jeez Louise, it's amazing. Amazing stuff.
Very good.
Mark Radulich is impressed. And the
He's
song's
not.
good, too. The song's good, too.
I have to say, so far, I mean, we're here really to talk about the music, though it's also good to get some insight into what these songs are about.
Sabaton's all about history of war.
No,
I
and
mean,
I'm fine. But that's where I was going with this. So I'm fine with it. But I mean, I think it needs to be said that we're about 3 tracks into this. We're up to the 4th track, and so far there's not a dog in the bunch here. These are all really solid. I don't think that one wasn't my favorite. I got to be honest. The first 2 there, The Future of Warfare and The 7 Pillars of Wisdom, I liked more. But 82nd All the Way is not a bad song. Not by any stretch.
Not too shabby. Well, this next one gets crazy.
All right. This next one's about Oswald's Fortress. Oswald, of course, being the Penguin. This is...
Good Lord, I hate you so much. I'm actually going to give you a pass on the pronunciation of that, because I know you didn't look up the language it's supposed to be written in.
All right, here we go. This is The Attack of the Dead Men.
The front, Wilhelm's forces on the hunt. There is a thunder in the east. It's an attack of the disease. They've been placing poison gas. 7,000 charge en masse. Turn the tide of the attack and force the enemy to turn back. And that's when the dead men are marching again. All Soviets, then and again. Attack of the dead. 100 men facing the red once again. 100 men charge again, die again. All Soviets, then and again. Attack of the dead. 100 men facing the red once again. 100 men charge again, die again.
That song is in desperate need of a KMFDM remix. It needs to be. It needs to be more disco.
I hate you so much.
It's not disco enough for me. It's like it's just about getting to disco, and then it dies off, and then it goes back to boring metal. It needs to be more disco.
You don't ever want to go full disco.
No one in the history of humanity has ever uttered the sentiment it needs more disco in sincerity.
This is in desperate need of a KMFDM danceable remix. KMFDM Sabaton Light.
Winfree, I want to know why dead people are marching again. Please tell me.
I'm seriously debating just how silly I want to get with my answer to potentially get Mark Radulich to not be himself.
You can try, but my wife still hasn't found the answer to that one.
Yeah, but your wife's less invested in that process than I am, I think. All right. The incident in question takes place around Auschwitz Fortress, which is it exists in what is now Poland. And I think Poland did in fact exist during this part of World War I. Poland's had a weird history, man. It has just been broken up and dispersed by different people, by different other empires at different times.
I want to say Jared Diamond included Poland in his book Collapse, which was about like the end of civilizations and like the patterns that emerge. And it was either that book.
I think I've read that actually. It's a really interesting book.
I just act dumb and I don't have a great memory, but I've actually like read smart stuff, and I've read a bunch of Jared Diamond's books. Anyway, I don't know if it was that one or another one that talked about like Polish Congress being one of the weirdest political bodies in the history of like politics.
Yeah. Anyway, it was in Poland. This was a battle that took place on the Eastern Front, and it was a very contested location for a while. It lost all of its strategic value by the time World War II came around. The Germans just ignored it, basically. Some technological advancements had allowed them to just kind of bypass the geographic choke point that it was meant to kind of command and defend. But what we're talking about here actually took place on August 6th, I believe, of 1915. And okay, the fort itself had been under siege, more or less, from September of 1914 up and through August of 1915. And some external fortifications, trench setups were the key thing here, because if the defenders, primarily Russians, and there was the Russian army, and there were militiamen as well. If they could keep the Germans far enough back, they were out of range of their artillery bombardments. When the Germans were able to push forward far enough, they got into operation, and then artillery fire was exchanged. The incident here, the Germans decided, you know what, screw it, let's gas them. And they launched not a joke, they launched a bunch of chlorine gas in conjunction with their artillery bombardment. I don't know how far along exactly that bombardment went on, but after the bombardment, there were about 7,000 men making up this particular division. There were 12 battalions, so a full division, basically, of German soldiers that advanced through the trenches up towards towards the fort. They were met by a countercharge of somewhere between 60 and 100 survivors from this bombardment. And they were – I don't know if you've ever seen what happens to people exposed to chlorine gas.
I don't know. But after the ramen that I had for lunch today, my daughter was accusing me of giving off chlorine gas, and her eyes got very watery.
How they cast Seth Rogen over you as Pumba, I will never know.
He tried.
But they were so unsettled despite being significantly in the strength numerically, again, like 7,000 to 100, massive numerical advantage. But the Germans panicked just due to the visuals of these guys charging them. And the reason it's called the Charge of the Dead Men is they were dead. Like that much exposure to chlorine gas, congratulations, you're dead. What are you going to do with your last minutes of life?
Surprise, you're dead. Ha, ha, ha. It never ends.
And these guys countercharged 1,000 advancing Germans. Got them to panic. I mean, there were a few of them that were reported to actually be coughing up blood as they're charging.
Gosh.
So it looks like something out of a horror movie. The Germans decide, you know what? Enough of this. Turn around and head out, and there were enough remaining Russian guns still on the fort to open fire on the fleeing Germans and essentially just decimate or destroy that. Might actually full on annihilated that particular battalion.
What's amazing about this story is that essentially a battalion of dead, was it Polish? Who had breathed in Russian, who had breathed in like chlorine gas, fought off a battalion of Germans. We have people in the United States who are still saying things like, I joined the military to travel the world, I didn't expect to fight.
We still have people in the United States who don't like the idea that someone out in the world might be able to fundamentally express a position that they disagree with. I need a safe space. These men were dead. And they still said, you know what? Screw it. I'm taking as many of them with me as I can.
Yeah.
Has that movie ever been made about this battle?
I don't think
There's
so.
There's some YouTube stuff. I was just looking at it, as a matter of fact. It's not a straight up movie, but there is definitely some like reenactments of what happened. And
I need to double check because there's a very famous poem that I guarantee neither of you jackanapes has actually read because Mark is illiterate. And Jesse...
I like how he calls me illiterate, and I'm the one quoting Henry David Thoreau on an ongoing basis.
Was it in a comic at one point? I might have seen it.
See?
Mark, I don't know where you got that Thoreau quote, but that's the only thing from Thoreau that you know.
It's the only thing I remember. I used to know a lot of Thoreau. I was very Thoreau with my Thoreau.
No.
Anyway, there's a very famous poem called Dulce et decorum es, which details a gas attack, and it's told because it's written in English, although that line itself is of course Latin. And I cannot remember the specific encounter that one is written about, but it contains some very, very famous, very haunting language describing what it's like to be involved in a gas attack like that. And this is one of those stories that, there just aren't a lot of people like that in the world anymore.
It's definitely something I would like to see somebody adapt into, leading up to this attack into a feature motion picture. It's a good story, especially in the culture we live in now. I think it's an interesting parable. Are you in agreement with me? This song needs more disco, right?
The world needs less disco. Disco is terrible.
It got almost dancey, and then it just kind of drew back. It was like, oh yeah, we're a metal band. But I think that they should have embraced the dancey.
There are elements throughout this album and the tracks where they do feel like they're just kind of experimenting with other genres.
Yeah.
I won't say disco is one of them, because I really don't believe that that's the case. But they one of the songs that we're going to hear, I think it might even be the next one. I don't know. But it almost feels like we're going into Deep Purple territory. We get a bunch of organ and keyboards, but yeah, they flirt with things in their music, which I think is neat. I like seeing that. Yeah. But they always do keep it metal.
Yeah, I'm gonna tweet, just like I tweeted David Simon.
Oh, here we go.
I'm gonna tweet Anesh from KMFDM. Mm-hmm. And tell them they need to do a remix of Attack of the Dead Men and make it more KMFDM-ish.
All right, go for it.
Put it out there. The world was a much better place when your wife had hidden your Twitter password.
Speaking of hiding things from me, this next song is called Devil Dogs. Devil Dogs.
Kill, fight, die, that's what the songs you do. Top of the game, earning their name. They were the devil dogs in a war machine. They were the USA Marines. 1918, USA intervene. Until now, they're mainly observing. There in the wheat fields in a small piece of land is a battle that will write history. Fighters are trapped, and the fighters rebel. For the sixth time they manage to break the line. Out of their code, and a part of their law, the deadliest weapon on earth. Kill, fight, die, that's what your songs should do. Top of the game, earning their name. They were the devil dogs in a war machine. They were the USA Marines. Dogs lead ahead and attack through the lead. To test at the Battle of Bellow. Clearing the forest and advance through the trees. It's the end of the war that's in sight. Kill one for two, it's a final breakthrough. It's a key to controlling the battlefield. Second to none, a marine and a gun. And the foes are up in fear of their name. Kill, fight, die, that's what your songs you do. Top of the game, earning their name. They were the devil dogs in a war machine. They were the USA Marines.
All right, that was Devil Dogs, which talks about the Battle of Baloo from the Jungle Book. Hit it, Winfree.
He's going to hit something.
Hey, Robert,
Yeah.
you don't drink. What are you doing?
Contemplating taking it up. This tells the story of one of the more famous battles in American military history. This is, again, the Battle of Biela Wood, which was a very long engagement. That battle, by most reckonings, began on June 1st of 1918 and ended on June 26th of 1918. This was a prolonged battle that just went on and on and on and on. And it tallied up a tremendous, cost in bodies, material, personnel, all of it. I mean, just the United States, when we're talking about this, suffered the United States forces, which were primarily the Marines. Again, this is a battle that lives in Marine lore for a very good reason. Our forces suffered 9,777 casualties, with 1,811 of those being dead, and no actual number of dead on the of casualties from the German side. But again, this was a tremendous battle. The Marine Corps were the ones who kind of instigated like the final charge that broke through the German lines. And this actually includes one of the. I have to make sure that I'm correct here, because I believe this is the one that includes the very famous line that has now become ingrained into the cultural lexicon. Yeah, one of the sergeants for the Marines when they began their attack. First Sergeant Dan Daly, who was a recipient of 2 different Medals of Honor, had served in multiple in military actions throughout his service, urged his men forward with what have now become the immortal words, "Come on, you sons of bitches, do you want to live forever?"
Nice. That was a Queen song. Who wants to live forever?
Speaking of immortality.
Yes.
Freddie Mercury, not actually immortal.
Proven fact.
Quite dead.
But his music lives on.
So yeah, again, this is a very, very famous engagement. It was a very costly battle all the way around, but a very important one when it came to actually breaching the German lines and starting the final kind of push out of France really into Germany that would wind up inevitably ending the First World War. And somewhat apocryphally, because there's not a lot of there's some dispute about whether or not this was an actual part of the German lexicon at the time, but the Marine nickname of Devil Dog was supposed to have sprung out of this battle where the Germans referred to them as that.
And now it's a tasty pastry.
You hear a little bit of the lyric there that the deadliest weapon in the world is the United States Marine and his rifle, which is a direct quote from General Pershing after this battle.
And now the most deadly weapon in the world is diabetes.
Also not true.
Well, what do we think of the song, Jesse?
This was my least favorite. And it's not because,
that man.
Not because of the content. It was something that I just couldn't. I didn't like the sound of it. I mean, I was not impressed by the sound of it. The lyrics, I can always dig a Sabaton song because of the history that they're displaying throughout their lyrics. And granted, I mean, Marines are badass.
I kept thinking about Captain America, like doing a USO show from the first Avenger during this.
Okay.
Like that's what it evoked in me.
Okay. Well, I mean, I guess I could see that. But yeah, I think, in my opinion, I think this is the weakest track off the album.
It's. I mean, I don't think there are any bad tracks, but it's not the best track.
Okay.
Any thoughts on the actual song there, Winfree?
Nah, I mean, again, much as I disagree with what you personally enjoyed, I mean, if it didn't really resonate with you, then, fair play.
Yeah,
okay. Like I said, it sounds like a very heavy USO stage song. All right, this next song is about Snoopy's worst enemy, the Red Baron. This is called The Red Baron.
Nothing there in between. The flying circus and the man from Russia. The sky in a plane. This man commands his domain. answer. Just from above, you're under fire. Stay red as blood, it's roaming higher. Born a soldier from the horseback to the skies. That's where the legend will arise. And he's flying higher, the king of the sky. He's flying too fast and he's flying too high. Higher, an eye for an eye. The legend will never die. First to the scene, he's a lethal machine. He's not the April and the tide is turning. Fire and whale, it's the thrill of the kill. For invasion down with engines burning. Embrace the flame, red squadron leader. Call out his name, Roteka Flieger. In the game to win, the gambler rolls the dice. 80 allies paid the price. And he's flying higher, the king of the sky. He's flying too fast and he's flying too high. Higher, an eye for an eye. The legend will never die.
Oh, I love that one. That's one of my favorites off of here. Like, no joke. That's on, that's about Manfred von Richthofen.
Richthofen.
Whatever. Anyway, that's got so...
You are so New York, it hurts.
Anyway, that song's got so much swing. I want to see Lacey Evans come out to it.
Goodness.
Oh, she's so traditional, Jesse. It's unconditional, as I keep trying to tell you. Anyway, that song's got fucking serious swing. I love it.
Mark's fetish for women with well-developed backs, notwithstanding.
I do look a muscular woman. Anyway, yeah, man, that's one of my favorites off of here. Don't you think, Jesse?
I agree, actually. It is one of my favorites as well, just because it does have a lot of energy in it. And, I mean, from talking about the Red Baron, I mean, can you talk about any song that really displays just how effective this pilot was? I know Winfree's going to tell us about it, but, man, the Red Baron has been around for a while, and you know, the myth of the Red Baron, I guess you would say. Well, there's a lot of fact to it.
Legend.
Well, hang on. Let me
straight up legend.
Let me
There's
start you
very
off.
little myth.
Let me start you off here. It was a dark and stormy night. Go.
Oh God, I don't know how. You don't know how badly I want to kick you for that.
Like half our audience though didn't get that joke. That's yet another peanut
Makes
joke.
me want to kick them too. First of all.
All right, you're up there, Captain
History. As a big Peanuts fan, I do appreciate the reference.
Yeah, I do try. I mean, look, I'm not going to have the level of detail and all this historical stuff that you or maybe an Andrew Graham does, but I got jokes. I got jokes for days.
I mean, there's so much to kind of unpack when we're talking about.
Can you do it in 50 words or less?
No.
Well, you're going to have to. We don't have 2 hours.
I know. I'm going to try very hard not to take that long. We're talking the gentleman in question, Manfred von Richthofen, was again mentioned. He's actually Prussia. He was Prussian, which is not a country that exists anymore. The Kingdom of Prussia is part of the German Empire. The German Empire was disbanded largely after World War I, somewhat reincorporated after in the lead up to World War II, and then after World War II, Germany was split and then reforged later on, et cetera, et cetera. He initially, when he joined the military, was a cavalry officer, because mounted cavalry was still a thing in parts of World War I. A horrible, horrible thing.
We lost a lot of good horses that day.
You have no idea. No idea. He transferred into again, the Air Force, the burgeoning Air Force, because I'm not entirely sure why. There's a little bit of there's some questions around that, but he moved into it and displayed a tremendous aptitude. He's regarded as the ace of aces. Throughout all of World War I, aerial combat, he was the standard to which all pilots measured and aspired. He racked up a grand total of. Let's see if I can find the number here. Actually, because he had a tremendous number of victories.
They said in the song, it says 80 allies paid the price. So, and I think
there's a bit of dispute around that, but that is basically the number.
Okay.
Again, there is some debate around whether or not he got full credit for some other fighters that were downed by his other members of his other wing or his squadron at the time. Again, so we'll never really have the full detail, but 80 is kind of generally the number that gets thrown around. How accurate it is, is the subject of ongoing debate. But that's a tremendous number of straight up success in aerial combat, especially early aerial combat. Much as I hate to give James Franco credit for existing. There is a movie that he stars in called Flyboys, which, while not a great movie, some of these sequences depicting World War I aerial combat, because it is the story of some of the first Americans that went over prior to America's actual official involvement in World War I. There were Americans who went over kind of either as a sort of observers or voluntarily who participated in that program, and it's early aviation is crazy in general. Early aviation, when you add in gunfire, is absolutely insane.
Mm-hmm.
So that movie is not, in some respects, it's not historically accurate because it doesn't actually. A lot of individuals are kind of left out or made up, but the aerial combat itself is very engaging if you want to try and get a loose feel for what it would have been like. And again, the Red Baron is just a giant figure in the history of aerial combat, in popular culture, and was able to best Snoopy consistently for several decades. And you know what? That more than anything else.
Yes. All right. All right.
I just wanted to quickly point out something here, that with this particular song, one of the things about Sabaton is they sing about the heroics and the crazy shit that happens in war. You notice we're talking about their songs revolve around all sides that are fighting in this war. Germany, Russia, all these sides that are coming together throughout the Great War, and I think that's
There's actually a song in one of their previous albums that talks about a very relatively small Brazilian force from World War II that held off a significant advancement of the German army.
Yeah, their music is about I don't want to say glory, but I mean it is. It really is the glory of actually being able to survive, and the survival sometimes as well of warfare. So that's what I really like about the band. The fact that it doesn't seem like they take sides. It's more about how they, tell the story of some just absolute insane stuff that people.
They pay honor to the horror and heroism that is endemic of warfare.
Exactly.
All right. So this next one is, of course, named after it's the nickname of World War I, the Great War, the war to end all wars, Great War. It says here in the wiki it's about the suffering in World War I, specifically in the Battle of Pasadena. So here we go.
Oh, God, no. Just no.
Here we go. Great War.
We're dim in lies, I'm paralyzed, my brother's eyes are gone. And he shall be buried here, nameless marks his grave. Mother home, get a telegram and shed a tear of grief. Mud and blood in foreign land, trying to understand. Where is this greatness all been told? This is the life that we've been sold. Is this our worldly sacrifice? Great war, and I cannot take more. Great war, I keep on marching on. I play the great score. There will be no encore. Great war, the one to end all wars.
We're getting a little samey, don't you think, Jesse?
When I listened to this album like the 3 or 4 times that I did there leading up to this review, there were a couple times I remember initially going, okay, Sabaton, you sound like Sabaton. Let's move on.
That's where I'm coming from. Where nothing's bad, nothing necessarily stands out as what's this. Here's the problem: it's kind of like a heart rhythm monitor where it like spikes with something amazing, and then it's like, yep, everything here sounds like Sabaton. Pretty even line, and then it spikes again with something amazing. Winfree, tell me about the Battle of Passamaquoddy.
Passamaquoddy.
Oh, Passamaquoddy.
Tell me about the song about Passama Grape Ape.
Passamaquoddy is...
Oh, go ahead, get it out of your system.
Passamaquoddy, Jesse, is a town from Pete's Dragon.
Okay, my bad.
Further confirming that no one has seen or cared about Pete's Dragon.
Oh, Passamamessa. No.
Okay, first of all, the Battle of Passchendaele, I'm probably mispronouncing that, my apologies, is actually the third battle of Ypres, which was is a series of bluffs. Or a city, rather. I have to double-check some of this, because it takes place in Flanders, which was at the time, I believe, like its own little sub-country before being incorporated by Belgium, though I might be mistaken about that. It still has a weird thing where it's like half Dutch, half Belgium, and exists on the border of those two. But I believe is nominally part of Belgium from a geopolitical structure. Again, this is the third battle of this one, and this battle took place from the 31st of July to the 10th of November, 1917. This lasted for a really long time. Belgium as a country is actually the reason for World War I as it was propagated, as it took place, but if you want to get really into the history of that, we can get into that later. It just drug on. This was very traditional trench warfare. This was very brutal. This was very boring. This was very much, we charge and we get repelled and we take some and then we lose it, and then it just went on and on and on. And this song in particular touches on... They refer to this as the Great War because this was the first time we had truly two things. One was the scope. Prior to World War I, there had been wars that were... there's actually a bit of a historical joke that all wars, in some perspective, were world wars because they encompassed the known world. They just didn't know all that much of the world. This one was the first time we all kind of knew the length and breadth of the world and how much was affected by it. This was also the first time war took place on a truly industrial scale. The closest you had gotten prior to World War I believe would have been the American Civil War, which was in some respects post-industrial revolution. In fact, the lack of certain areas of the United States to industrialize led to some of the issues that helped bring that about in a lot of respects. The lack of industrialization in the South led to some of their disenfranchisement. And this was the first time we got a real societal look at what the new technologies made capable from a warfare perspective. And the reason they called it the Great War was that they couldn't actually imagine something of when I say greater, I don't mean, boy, that's great, but of larger scale than what took place. And this battle in particular featured tremendously long bombardments, featured a tremendous amount of time, and a lot of loss of life. I mean, I don't think there's pictures of the aftermath of some of these battles where the entire landscape is devastated in ways that you might think a contemporary high explosive had been dropped on them. It's a really, again, there's a lot that went into this that just completely shocked our collective consciousness as humanity. I don't know if anyone listening would have went out to see the in color documentary that Peter Jackson helped put together called "They Will Not Grow Old," but it deals with a lot of this as well, and is a real tremendous piece of filmmaking in a lot of respects.
That's all well and good, but my question is, what does the angry metal guy think?
Oh my goodness, the angry metal guy. Well, taking
I don't know.
a look...
Cooper's not here.
Metal Coop.
No,
All
he's
right,
the sexually frustrated metal guy.
Oh my. Well, okay. I'll read a little bit to you here. According to what he says, The Great War is a short, tight 38-plus minutes, and almost all the songs are under 4 minutes. That makes for a fast hit-and-run style album that works in the band's favor. No song overstays its welcome, and things are kept moving at a brisk pace. While the writing is inconsistent, there are no complete duds or mandatory skips, and it's an easy platter to blast through.
Yeah, I largely agree with that.
Yeah, I don't understand what he means by the writing is inconsistent.
I think it's what we were talking about before, where it's like a lot of it just sounds like the plain old regular garden variety Sabaton, and then you've got some real stellar tracks in there.
Okay, all right. Well, yeah, he gave it a 3 out of 5. So apparently, I don't know if this is the same dude or not, but right below that review, they had talked about Sabaton's Last Stand. They gave that a 3.5 out of 5. So just a smidge under their previous album. But Angry Metal Guy doesn't seem too pissed off this time. I mean, criticism aside, he's not dropping some scathing review about how they fucked up or anything. So,
all right, let's move on to our next song here. This is A Ghost in the Trenches.
Move between the lines, a soldier breaking the confines. A force to fight from overseas, a war in foreign land, await the eager recruits. And in the midst among the men, a soldier with a different past returns to his roots. Into battle, the gas has them bend. Then this soldier invoked the spirits of the wind. Under fire, a ghost that rules the battlefield. Move between the lines, a soldier breaking the confines. Man of the man and rifle, a marksman and a scout revealed. Makes his way from trench to trench alone, moving undetected, and on the fields of Passchendaele, a guiding light for reinforcements finding their way. And in the battle of the star, bring ammo over no man's land and fire away. In the battle, the gas had them bend. Big Gamma invoke the spirits of the wind. Under fire.
You know, there's some of this where I think they would almost be better served doing a Broadway musical set to, like, heavy metal songs about the war. And, like, this one, A Ghost in the Trenches, I'll let Robert tell you about who this is about because I'm not going to attempt that last name.
Racist.
But I hear that and I'm like, this is a song that definitely needs visuals. It just seems, like if you just listen to it, it's like, it sounds like Sabaton. But there's imagery that's being evoked here that I think would accompany the song and make it better. So, take that for what you will. Robert?
All right, Mark's insistence on not pronouncing the name of First Nationers. This is largely about Francis, and depending on which... Okay, I preface this. Depending on which nation he comes from specifically, there's a few of these...
Do it.
There's a few of these that would be pronounced differently.
Say it. Do it.
But
say his name.
Francis Pegahab... Pegahab.
Yeah.
Was a Canadian, again, First Nationer, and was largely considered... Oh, was he Ojibwe?
Yeah.
Are you just making up words?
No, you racist.
It says in Ojibwe his name was Beneswee. The wind that blows off.
Fix your mic, Jesse. You're not making any sense.
Shut up, Mark.
Anyway, he volunteered to be part of the Canadian Expeditionary Force in 1914. He actually had took some effort getting into the military because there were some pretty discriminatory policies in place. He arrived in Europe and actually fought in the Second Battle of Ypres, where the Germans used chlorine gas for the first time. So he was present for the first instance of modern chemical warfare. Survived, is largely credited as being the most successful sniper and scout in the entirety of World War I. He fought for the entire war, for the entirety of, again, for almost all of it, from 1914 to 1919, I believe. He is credited with... I mean, first of all, he has received every major Canadian military award that exists. Like, he's got them all, I think. He's credited with, I forget how many... Here it is, 378 kills.
Wow.
And 300 captures or so. He attained the rank of Sergeant Major, which I think has a slightly different positional hierarchy than Sergeant Major does in the American Armed Forces, though I could be wrong.
What about Sergeant Pepper?
The worst thing ever made. He received, I think, all of them except for the Distinguished Conduct Medal. Might not have received the Victoria Cross either. I'd have to double check that because some of these have changed over the years. But received a number of specific commendations. Survived the whole thing and fought for the vast majority of it. Became a politician and activist back in Canada after the war ended. His service time was up. Tremendous. Some stories that have come out about this guy. He was responsible for going through heavy machine gun and rifle fire into the traditional no man's land and retrieving enough ammunition for his group to stave off a heavy offensive by the Germans. That actually was the one that got him his second bar on his military medal. He is one of only 39 Canadians to have achieved that. This guy did a lot of stuff. Tremendous heroism that he displayed. And was in some pretty pivotal battles along the way as well. So definitely an impressive record of service and an impressive human being.
Very impressive. All right, This next one is our first single. It's the one that Jesse and I did a Metal Hammer of Doom Extra on, which had the most amazing comments ever. How many dead people you want in this video? Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the best tracks on the album. This is Fields of Verdun.
As the drum roll started on that day, like 100 miles away, a million shells were fired, and the green fields turned to gray. The bombardment lasted all day long, yet the forts were standing strong. Heavily defended, now the traps been sprung and the battle's begun. Descending to darkness, 303 days below the sun, fields of Verdun, and the battle has begun. No way to run, father and son, fall one by one under the gun. Thy will be done, and the judgment has begun. No way to run, father and son, fall one by one. Fields of Verdun.
Fields of Verdun. We can't get a clear shot there. There's these metal guys on the way.
You know what's funny? Speaking of YouTube and its comments, so I posted that video and tagged you guys in it there on Facebook about the attack of the Walking Dead or whatever it was, and I can't remember what it was called.
The Charge of the Dead, man.
Charge of the Dead. Okay,
By
so
Radulich.
I post the video right now. That video was created 2 years ago, and the top comment was 1 month ago, specifically quoting the song that we listened to, and with another 20 replies underneath of it about how Sabaton was great.
Nice. So that, of course, was about the French victory in the Battle of Verdun. They didn't pass, as the song says. They tried to pass, they didn't pass.
Classic Sabaton here, in my opinion. This was, I mean, if you're going to release a single, this one's just as good as any of the other ones off of here.
Yeah, no, this is a pretty stellar track. All right, Winfree, tell us about all the fathers and sons who got felled at the Battle of Verdun.
Okay, the Battle of Verdun. The longest battle in the entirety of the First World War. This lasted from the 21st of February 1916 to the 18th of December that same year.
Christ.
Long-ass battle.
This battle lasted 9 months, 3 weeks, and 6 days. I think if you mathed it out, it's a little over 1,000 days. Sorry, not 1,000. My mistake. It's actually, if you look at the YouTube release of the historical version of this song, it does list the specific number of days. I can't remember off the top of my head. My apologies. This is the most costly battle of the war, again, in terms of material and in terms of personnel. There's some discrepancy about the number of casualties and losses. Originally, the battle lasted for 303 days. It is the longest battle in human history, and one of the most costly as well. Again, there is some dispute. I believe there's I think the most common accounting of the loss of life arrives at a total casualty count of 714,231.
Teacher, I have a series of stupid questions.
All right, go for it.
1. After about the first month of trench warfare, you're telling me we couldn't get air support or tanks into this?
Did not. They existed. It did not actually affect. Look, there's only so much air support that could be helpful here. Again, heavy bombardment from the air was not really as much of a thing. Now, there were still Zeppelins.
Right.
Tanks did exist, but again, we're talking early tank, early technology for tanks. So dealing with all the trenches that were dug, there were some terrain issues here as well. I don't believe this is a very flat. elements of this are not flat. And tanks had been around for a while, so there was enough knowledge of some of the mechanical failings to build, structures in place, to build some of these tank traps. That it just vastly complicated things.
Okay, supply lines. How were they not? How were they not cut? How were the German supply lines not cut so they couldn't? So at least after a month or two, they wouldn't have just lost the battle by attrition.
Because this is part of one of the when you look at the battle lines that are drawn for this, they cover the front as such covered a tremendous amount of distance. It also, if you were to try to go behind, the notion of cutting supply lines, while a very valid thing to do, also tends to require the ability to maintain position. Otherwise, you're just harassing.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, a French force trying to break through some portion of the German lines to get further behind them to then harass their supply lines would have. I mean, just trying to break through the lines in general was such a catastrophic, not failure, but it was such a massive undertaking that you'd rather just try to break the lines generally and force them into a more sustained retreat than to try and get a group behind to then realistically try and do something about the lines of supply.
Okay, what about lighting everything? What about lighting the battlefield on fire?
Do you think they didn't?
That still didn't work, huh?
Dude, a million shells.
There was so much artillery fire over this. I mean, again, there's another, for the record, there's another list of casualties that it was proposed in 2014 that listed, I believe, 976,000.
Gosh.
And if you count some of the the damage to the city and some of the resulting humanitarian issues in there, it climbs further to a little over 1.25 million.
Jesus. So what inevitably broke the Germans to after 9 months of this?
Just attrition. It was just They could, and other failures in other parts of the line, allocation of resources. It's again, this is one of those battles that is still studied to this day because of how long it went on, the mistakes that were made on both sides, strategic decision making. It was a lot of just you take. This was the battle that had featured a lot of, okay, you will take this stretch of 300 yards. And the associated trenches, and you'll move your artillery closer and you'll try to fire further, and then a little bit later we'll push back and we'll take. It was fighting over a lot of the same ground.
I'm actually really surprised that aerial bombardment didn't work.
Well, again, you didn't really have heavy bombers. The technology just wasn't quite there.
Yeah, this was the time of fucking, like we said, Red Baron.
Again, if you biplanes. Like if you wanted bombardment from the air, this is not a joke. You got a Zeppelin that you loaded up with bombs.
No, I understand that, but okay. I mean,
that would then be harassed by all sorts of aircraft from either side.
Right.
It was just such bombing from this was just such a ponderous thing. You didn't get carpet bombing until World War II, just because the technology wasn't there.
Okay, I mean that's fair enough.
I was just going to say, I'm reading the last sentence of the wiki here. The French took 11,387 prisoners and 115 guns. Some German officers complained to Mangin about their lack of comfort in captivity, and he replied, he says, "We do regret it, gentlemen, but then we didn't expect so many of you."
Fields up for done! All right. It's a great song. Let's move on, unless we have anything else to say here. So last song that we're going to listen to tonight, because I'm not doing In Flanders Fields.
Oh, there's a great Simpsons reference there.
Flanders. This is, of course, about World War I casualties. This is the end of the war to end all wars. Do, 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 do. All right, all in all, I'm going to give this album a solid A. I mean, really nothing bad about it. It's solid to great. I wish there were a few more standout tracks to it, but it is what it is.
Okay. I will say that I enjoy the theme. I mean, I'm not just saying war here. I like the fact that they are focusing specifically on World War I here and telling us stories, some of the heroes and some of the people, and some of the tragedy that fell. Like that particular song and the song "The Great War" are really sad songs when you look at the lyrics about the effect that war has on just obviously someone who's fighting in it and those around them. So when I listen to a Sabaton song, I'm there to learn about something specifically usually, and a lot of times Sabaton follows through with some great riffs, some fucking epic sounding like choir in the background. It's usually a recipe for a great a great song and a great album. So I really enjoyed myself on this one. As to where it's going to fall, I don't know, man. I mean, I think it's probably going to... It's not top for me this year, for sure. It'll probably be above the mid-grade stuff that we've listened to. But I had a good time and learned a lot. Winfree?
This song is actually touches on some of the things I kind of want to talk about, because World War I tends to get overlooked when we talk about, the history of warfare, because everyone much prefers the narrative that comes out of World War II because,
America.
Obvious reasons. I actually tend to think that the way, especially American conception of these conflicts, of separating them into World War I and World War II, as opposed to viewing them as one single sustained conflict from the start of World War I to the end of World War II, has led to some pretty serious problems in our understanding of the way we discuss, the geopolitical realities at the time, and how we as a culture had to evolve our understanding of warfare and the aftermath of warfare in particular to try and get a handle on that societally and from a just generalized human civilization perspective. World War I was called the war to end all wars because it was so shocking and so massive and so terrible in what took place. Again, we're talking about...
They really did think, like, psychologically that this was going to be it. Who'd want to do this again? And then they would do it a decade or so later.
In fact, that kind of cultural trauma to, especially Europe, is part of what actually led Hitler to be as successful as he was, because so many everyone with a functional brain, well, everyone who's not in some degree damaged or insane, looked at this and went, there's a lot we need to do so that this never happens again. Unfortunately, there was a lot of people in power and a lot of societies, Germany, Japan, Italy, that got a raw deal in a lot of very real ways. And then you have, the insanity of Hitler and the rise to prominence of Stalin after the Bolshevik Revolution, and the institution of communism, because socialism never ends badly, right? That just... You had a mix of personalities in addition to a real boiling pot of resentment in many respects. And again, all the sane people kind of went, okay, we came out on the winning side of this, but really bad things are going to happen if we do this again, especially as technology started rapidly advancing. That again, there were significant portions of the governments of Europe that just went, you know what, to avoid this again, let's just give Hitler a few things. And he'll stop, because he was a soldier in World War I. He knows how terrible this is. He's not going to want to, no, he does. But again, World War I was a massive turning point in, again, what industrialized warfare looked like. And while it wasn't the war that, again, ended all wars, because we wound up doing it again, World War II... and again, especially viewed as a continuation in many respects of World War I, it did in fact in many respects end all wars. We talk a lot about, conflicts that have arisen since. And don't get me wrong, war is still a thing. Conflict is, for God's sake, Somalia has been in a state of civil war for the past 20 years. This is not a thing that has gone away. Warfare as a product of the human condition still exists. But if you look at the scope of large-scale warfare since World War II, it does not exist nearly on the same scale. Again, there have been conflicts. We're still involved in some. The United States, that is. There's plenty of others. Again, there's huge regions of the world that are not politically stable. On all major continents, except Antarctica, because they know what they're doing. And probably parts of Australia. Yeah, Australia's probably pretty solid. But there's parts of North America. There's huge segments of Central America that are not stable. South America, not stable. Africa, huge segments, not stable. Parts of Europe, not stable. That's still a thing. But we do seem to have finally kind of realized as a society what a bad idea this is. Necessary at times. And don't get me wrong. I'm of the opinion that, military action, especially large-scale warfare, should be the absolute last resort. That said, it better be a button you're willing to push if you get to that point, because otherwise you get Hitler. Or Stalin, or Mao, or Saddam Hussein, or Pol Pot, or any of these, profoundly disturbed humans in power who have no qualms about the mass death and devastation that they will wreak to achieve their goals. And this song is a kind of a lament to that notion that we fought. A lot of people thought after this war, again, this is it. We're never doing this again. Well, not so much.
All right. I think that's.
I mean,
it.
and also just very briefly for the record.
Oh my God! Don't take such long pauses. Then I think you're done,
Sorry,
and then I try to end the damn show.
I was seeing if there was something else you wanted to touch on. Either of you else wanted to touch on, but
No.
Okay, the total number of military and civilian casualties from World War I ranks at about 40 million, with 15 to 19 million dead. It is among the deadliest conflicts in human history. And this was one of the first times, actually, that because around 2/3 of the military deaths actually took place in battle, whereas in most previous conflicts, death was associated with the disease that from infected wounds, bad amputations, etc., that came about after the battle itself took place.
It's rough stuff. Mark Radulich, send us home.
All right, well, I want to thank... yeah, it's time for me to go.
Goodness.
I want to thank Robert Winfree for coming on, sharing all his vast knowledge, showing that Jesse and I are a bunch of dullards. It's fine. It's all good.
You don't need me to show you that.
Look in the mirror.
Tomorrow on TV Party, Jesse and I will talk Cloak and Dagger Season 2.
It's a weird fucking show, man.
Yeah, it is. Yesterday, myself, Alexis Hana, and the aforementioned Robert Winfree did a review of The Lion King. It's great. The tiger says that. Prior to that, Jesse and I did a source material for Cloak and Dagger Shades of Grey. Next week, we've got DC Hanna-Barbera 3, where you get more of Robert Winfree. He's the judge. Here comes the judge. We'll do a review of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, L7 Scat of the Rat, and an on trial for Jackie Brown. All right, Winfree, hurry up and do your plugs. I'm dying over here.
You know what? No.
Right.
You don't need my plugs. I'm around. You guys can find me on Sundays for the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast. I host Damn You Hollywood most Tuesdays. I show up here on occasion, on TV parties on occasion. That's about it. I mean, you don't need an in-depth. You don't need an in-depth plug set for me. You guys should know where to find me by now.
Let me just say that the week of the 12th, we've got a bit of a change of plans here. Myself and Jesse Starcher are going to do one compare and contrast like we did with Alan Moore Month a few years ago. We're going to look at the comic and then the movie The Kitchen. Damn You Hollywood will just be Robert Winfree, Alexis Hana, and Jason Teasley, the prodigal son. That's P-R-O-D, not P-R-O-T. I'm a dope.
The protocol, son.
Yes, it's the protocol son.
Did you actually? Oh, you.
Yeah.
It was a mistake.
You godless heathens.
Fucked up. Anyway, they'll be doing scary stories to tell in the dark. Meanwhile, me and the four podsmen will be doing a SummerSlam weekend TV party. So that's what we'll be doing. We got Slipknot, We Who Are Not As Others on August 14th. Sean and I will be doing Glow Season 3 on the 15th, and then just announced, unless I can find something better or Jesse gets off his ass and go get himself a copy of fucking Flash Gordon.
No one should have a copy of Flash Gordon.
Ugh,
It is a blight on the cultural
You're a blight on the
experience of
culture.
humanity. I'm not disputing that at all.
We are going to, because of immortality is the theme over there on the, what is it called, Jesse?
Super blog team up.
We're going to do a watch along for Tron Legacy unless I can find something better, and God knows I'm going to try.
I'm not sure how you got immortality out of Tron Legacy, but all right.
It's a bit of a reach. That's why I'm trying to find something better.
It took us 45
We
minutes.
gave you other options, but you were like, no, I don't want to do vampires. I don't want to do this. I don't want to. I want to do Flash Gordon. Wee.
That was precisely how it sounded.
I want to do Flash Gordon. And until Jesse gives me way, I'm going to keep whining about it. Jesse.
Jesse, do not give in to him. He will never. He won't respect you.
I'm already going to the movies. He knows not to expect so much out of my cheap ass. I'm not going to buy a copy of Flash Gordon. The library might have it. The library does carry DVDs, so maybe I'll check there for you, Mark. That'll be about The only other
No.
Yeah.
Even if it has,
Shut up.
it does have it,
No,
tell him it doesn't.
No,
Why?
You shut up, Jesse. Go to the library. Go to the library and get yourself a copy of Flash Gordon. It's fine.
All right, yeah, sure. Are we ready?
The worst movie in the world.
You're the worst movie in the world. All right. Anyway, this has been the Metal Hammer of Doom. Again, thanks to all parties involved. Be well, be safe, and behave.
Hey, Dad.
What's up, honey?
So, summer's awesome. I love it and all, but it gets boring sometimes.
Oh, I know. How about we sign you up for the Jungle Island Summer Adventure Camp starting June 10th?
For real? My friends went last year and they said they had so much fun. The foam dart battleground, the animals, all the activities. They said this year there's also a new escape room and twin orangutans.
And don't forget the 300 vibrant birds that made Jungle Island famous. I'm going online and signing you up for the Jungle Island Summer Adventure Camp starting June 10th.
Visit jungleisland.com to plan your summer adventure. Hurry, space is limited. Starts June 10th.
Here it comes again. Lunch. Will it be the same old, same old? Or are you ready to take a vacation from the ordinary with the new Jamaican Jerk Turkey Sub at Firehouse Subs? Freshly sliced smoked turkey breast, craveably sweet mustard sauce, and a hint of Caribbean seasoning. Just $5.55 for a medium. Save time. Order the new Jamaican Jerk Turkey Sub on the Firehouse Subs app. Firehouse Subs. Enjoy more subs. Save more lives. Participating locations. Limited time only, plus tax. Prices may vary for delivery.